Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to the weekly live chat. It's funny because right before we went live, I was like, okay, am I doing everything right? It's been a few weeks since I've had a live chat, and every time there's that break, I kind of like forget what I'm doing. So hopefully you can hear me and see me and everything is great. Like I said, I've been off, I think it's been 4 weeks now. I don't know, it's been a long time. Super glad to be back. In today's live chat, I'm going to be showing some quilting pictures from a sampler quilt that I put together, or that I quilted, and so kind of giving some tips and kind of just talking about what do you do when things don't work out the way you want it to. So if you're watching live and you have a question, be sure to put that in the comment section. Jessica, as always, is behind the computer monitoring the chat. And today I have not one, not two, but 3 giveaways during the live chat. So I'm trying to make up for all the time I've lost. I'm trying to suck up to you with free stuff. Let me know if it's working. Anyway, to enter that, all you have to do is leave a comment in there, and Jessica will pick the winners at the end. So again, really excited to be here. It's been a few weeks. So I normally just talk about quilting. So it's always some kind of takeaway or some kind of, teachable moment. But I threw in some stuff that's not quilting related. So hopefully you can you humor me with that. So I was gone for 3 weeks because we were out of the state. We were in Alaska. So if you've never been to Alaska, you have to go. And I thought, I'm going to just throw some pictures of our trip. We have our annual quilt walk. And it's like this big culmination. It's like just a lot of work, a lot of stuff. And then I leave town for 3 weeks and sleep most of it. So that's where I was at. Anyway, Alaska's great. Had so much fun. It was hard coming back to Missouri where it's balls hot. Sorry for the crassness there. But it was like 50 degrees in Alaska. And I came home and I'm like, oh, this is not good. I mean, look at the baby moose twins. So cute. We were in Homer, which is like our favorite town in the whole world. So anyway, that's where I have been. Did miss you, but I was having a lot of fun. But I'm glad to be back for sure. Normally, I get on here every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central when I'm not out of town. So I'm super glad you're here watching with me now, or chatting with me now. A quick recap right before Quilt Walk, or right before I left you all for a month. We announced an upcoming free motion challenge quilting along video series. So if you already heard about it, you already know it's coming up pretty soon. Super excited. So starting in like 2 weeks-ish, we'll be doing the machine quilting feathers video series. And so this is going to be so much fun. I have been having a lot of fun putting the videos together and kind of editing it and kind of digging down in there. And I was telling Anna earlier today, I was like, I'm working on the expanded resource PDF, which is like this downloadable. It's like an ebook. I'm like, I need to rein myself in. There's like 42 pages in that thing. So I love feathers. I love talking about feathers. I can't wait to have the video series. We're going to talk about how to quilt feathers in different areas of your quilt. So even if you know how to quilt feathers, this will be perfect for you. Even if you have never touched a feather before, this will be perfect for you. I try to hit all of the skill levels in the design. So super excited about that. To find out more about it, you can visit quiltingismytherapy.com. We have it right on the main page. And like I said, we're going to be talking about feathers. I'm going to be quilting through this panel I designed just for the series, and working through thinner sashings and blocks and around blocks and all the things. Sometimes when I start talking out loud about quilting, I think, wow, I sound really obsessed, but what can I say? Anyway, again, we're going to have a lot of different videos coming out, or weekly videos coming out with different topics on feathers. So super excited. Again, if you are watching and you're like, summer is too busy for me, June is crazy, then no worries. The videos stay on my YouTube channel indefinitely. So you can always partake of a previous video series. You can always jump in on this later. It's totally fine. But I'm just going to kind of scroll through some of the designs we're going to be learning because, I mean, quilted pictures are just so pretty. Again, like how do we use feathers in the smaller sections, in bigger blocks? I have so much fun kind of pulling together what I want to teach and the designs that are in there. So just kind of, we're gonna have a great time. Great time. And best part is it's absolutely free. So you have no reason to not join me. The videos will be on my YouTube channel. So anyway, starting very, very quickly. All right. Another thing, I kind of already alluded to this, but we had our big quilt walk, our annual event. We have a quilt shop here in Liberty, Missouri, just outside Kansas City. And quilt walk is like our big event. I already kind of hinted at that. I was going to show you some pictures from the big day. It was so much fun. Line down the block. I was so like, I don't know, I was like, I couldn't believe so many people came. It was so cool. And I stood out in front of the shop and pretty much hugged people all day. It was like the best. But if you haven't heard me talk about it, you kind of go to participating shops and you get the pieces of a quilt pattern and you can kind of, look at the cute little town. And so it was just so much fun. The weather was perfect, which you can never say in Missouri. Never ever is Missouri weather perfect. But I didn't get very many pictures because I was too busy hugging everybody. But it was just a great, great time. So part of Quilt Walk, and again, if you've already heard this, you can kind of just tune me out for a second, is to give away the pieces of a pattern. And this was this year's pattern. So I designed a pattern, break it up into pieces, and you kind of walk around town collecting them. And this one was it's Spangled, and it was a request from the City of Liberty. They wanted something patriotic themed for the big 250 for America's birthday. And I'm like, okay, but you know, not everybody that's listening to me is from the U.S., and maybe not everybody wants eagles in their quilt. I love eagles, I'm just saying. So I tried to put together something that was red, white, and blue, but maybe a little bit different colors. And so this was the featured quilt. Now, right before Quilt Walk, what is it about quilters that last minute we think, you know what I should do? I should quilt this quilt last minute. I don't have enough time, but I think I'm going to do it. Surely I'm not the only one, right? So I thought, I'm going to quilt. Usually I have the shop quilt it because we have machine quilting services. I just let them do it. But I had a couple extra days. I'm like, ooh, maybe I'll quilt this myself. And I had this great idea that I was going to film me quilting it and all this stuff. That didn't happen. But I do have pictures. I just want to kind of give some tips and kind of insights when you're trying to pick designs for sampler quilts. So sampler quilts are fun because they have a bunch of different blocks. They're so cool, but sometimes picking the designs for those can be a little daunting. So this particular quilt was so much fun to quilt. It was a kind of fun that's fun after the fact. You know, there's fun in the moment, and then there's fun later on. I was struggling a lot with this quilt, and like, when it was done, I'm like, oh, I love the quilt. So if you're in the middle of a project and you're just struggling, keep going, because, you know, once it's over, it might not seem so bad at that point. So anyway, here's the quilt on my frame. I did it on my long arm because it's so much quicker that way, especially since I had limited time. This is about as much video footage as I got. Like I took a video so you could see it and then didn't do anything else after that. But I have lots of after pictures. So the first thing I'm looking at is like, okay, for a sampler quilt, I want to use designs or pick designs that can be used in a lot of different ways. Continuous curve would be a great example of that, or something that can be put in a lot of different blocks. That way I can kind of pick from the same 4 or 5 designs and just rearrange them for the blocks. We're going to see a lot of these in the pictures, a lot of geometric kind of dot-to-dot quilting and echoing, a lot of curves, continuous curves. And so once you kind of pick a design that can be used in a lot of different ways, it makes it so much more versatile. So this particular block, I kind of did that geometric kind of star shape in the middle of it. That shape can fit any kind of shaped block. So I knew, like, okay, this is great. I can use this in other blocks as well. But really, when I'm looking at the quilt, another thing I had to consider was the fabric is so busy. Now, that's kind of my fault because I designed the fabric, but I'm like, sometimes you can't see the quilting anyway. And if you can't see the quilting, I'm going to pick designs that are a little bit easier for me to quilt, a little bit quicker in general. But where you can see the quilting, that's where I'll put a little bit more emphasis. So you can kind of see that star in the center because you can kind of see the quilting there. Again, with sampler quilts, a lot of different blocks, but they're still made up of the same shapes, right? Our triangles, our squares. And once you find some designs that work for those shapes, you're going to be able to use them in a lot of different blocks. And then the arrangements that are created because of the block will make some really cool secondary effects. So I know it's kind of hard to see, but in the red kind of star points, I have some continuous curve. That's just that line that curves from one point on and then onto the next. And then that continuous curve motif that's in the center of it. So same technique, just a little bit of a different look because I'm using it differently. So again, try to pick a couple designs that you feel comfortable quilting because you'll be doing them a lot, especially through several different blocks. So again, I kind of just reused a lot of those in those blocks, especially for those busier fabrics since you couldn't see a whole lot of that anyway. Now, I should pause right here and tell you one of the giveaways is this quilt kit. So part of the Quilt Walk, you have the pattern, but you can buy the kit. I'm going to tell you more about that here in a second, but I'm going to be giving away a quilt kit, so you might be able to make that. A Spangled pattern, and then a Spangled panel, and we'll see, and a sticker. So we'll see more about this here in a second, but I got to tell you what you're entering, right? Because you're probably like, I don't know if I'm going to enter the giveaway if I don't know what it is. I'm just kidding, because you know, quilters, we want all the things. All right. Back to the subject. So when I'm working on this quilt or, you know, sampler quilts, sometimes there's blocks of different sizes. And this particular quilt is the same way. There's, I think, like, if I can remember correctly, 8-inch block, a 10-inch block. but the center of the quilt is one bigger block. And so I decided to use most of my kind of effort in my block quilting in that area, since I think people tend to look to the center of the quilt first, or, you know, it's kind of the more focal point. Now, I should say I didn't piece this quilt. If I had pieced it, my points would not have been as beautiful as they are here. And so I would have to pick designs a little bit different based on how well it's pieced as well. So this is kind of just some close-up pictures of that center kind of medallion kind of block. More of those geometric wedges filling in that kind of, I don't know, arrow shape, chevron shape. So again, if you can find those designs that you can use in some different ways, it just makes everything a lot easier. And there you can kind of see the center. For the most part, I use like a light blue thread over pretty much the whole quilt. But then every once in a while, I'd put a little pop of red or, you know, just a little bit of hint of color, just being a little cheeky there. It's kind of hard to see the quilting in the pictures because the thread color is kind of close to it, but hopefully you can get an idea of the texture. So some echoing, again, just kind of looking to the individual pieces of the block and then just putting the designs that fit that. I know that sometimes we want to know exactly what it's going to look like before we start, right? Like we're like, oh, I want to know how it's going to turn out, but sometimes it's just a happy surprise. So just start connecting those lines, throwing in those designs, and you might be surprised with what you get. In the border, so this part of the lecture is, you know, look at the whole quilt, Angela, before you pick designs for your areas. This is silly because I designed the pattern. Like I wrote it. Like I know that one border is bigger than the other. So I think the top borders are wider than the side borders to help make it more rectangular. So on my long arm, I start with the top border and I do this kind of swirl chain. You can kind of see it in that blue fabric. And then I thought, ooh, on one side I'll do a ribbon candy filler, and the other side I'll just kind of echo on off the quilt. The problem is, I start that, super great, happy with it. I go to turn the corner and I'm like, oh, that border is too narrow for all that. So I just did the ribbon candy on the top and bottom border. But I'm like, I should have double checked that. So sometimes it's a good idea to have a plan. Now, sometimes you're gonna have an idea and you're gonna think, this is the best idea I've ever had. This is the best quilting I'm ever gonna do on a quilt. And it doesn't quite work out the way you want it to work out. Even when that happens, you still have a quilt, right? You still learn something. So, and I've got to say, like, I've been quilting a long time, over 20 years, and I still make mistakes. So here's going to be my little journey in this particular quilt. Now, I'm going to pause and say, I always tell people that watch my live chats to not point out your mistakes. If somebody tells you the quilt looks nice, you just say thank you. Or you say, oh, it's something. But don't point out your mistakes, right? Because if nobody knows where they are, they won't look for them. But I can point out my mistakes because I'm a professional. So I'm showing you this kind of like as a, look, even Angela can make mistakes sometimes. Now, around that medallion or that kind of center block, I wanted to use the quilting to kind of create a secondary pattern. It's one of my favorite things to do because once you can kind of figure it out, like for an area, it's a lot of fun and really easy. So here I decided, you know, I'm going to connect some of the points on the outside of the block to this other block and do some echoing. Now, a little hint here. If you see a lot of echo lines, it means I had no clue what I was wanting to do. That's usually my default. If I'm like, I don't know what I want to quilt, I can't think of anything, I'll just start echoing something. And so when you see a bunch of echo lines like that, it's usually like, oh, she couldn't make a decision. So this is beautiful. And my idea was it was going to wrap around the block and like make this kind of cool secondary pattern that looks like it goes behind the block. So I'm super excited. I get started, you know, quilting my lines, putting a filler in there. There's that light blue thread that just looks so pretty. You can kind of see some of the progress pictures. So I'm kind of like, oh, loving that. But the problem is, oh, here you can kind of see what's going on without the quilting there. So I'm kind of imagining those lines connecting. This is just like a quick little graphic, so just don't worry too much about that one. Anyway, the problem is, when I got about halfway through the quilt, I realized, oh yeah, this center medallion is stretched out. It's not square. It is taller than it is wide. And what happens is those lines don't connect like they were supposed to. So you can kind of see right here where it just looks weird. So I kind of added some lines so you can see there. I was like, dang it, I should have just double checked that, one quick look, but I was in a rush, you know, like we are, like, oh, last minute. But here's the thing, I just left it. It was symmetrical. It was the same on the top and bottom, same on the sides. It just didn't kind of connect like I wanted them to. So sure, I was like, I would have picked something different had I looked ahead, but I've never been a perfectionist, so I'm totally fine with that. Now, I know some of you out there are perfectionistic tendencies, and that's awesome. That might be making you a little nerve, like behind your neck a little bit, but I just left it like, well, it is what it is. So anyway, another thing that was kind of tricky for this quilt, some quilts you start quilting and it just flows super well, and some just fight you, and this one was a little bit of a fighter. The next thing I had to decide was how I was going to fill in this space right here. I designed the pattern so you had that big center kind of focal block, and then had the smaller blocks around, but then there was like this weird space that kind of looked like a corner, but not really. And usually the question I ask is, can I fit a feather in this space? If I can fit a feather in the space, I'm usually going to quilt a feather in the space because I love feathers. But it didn't quite work out because some blocks were smaller than others, and I couldn't figure out how to make it turn. I already added those lines that weren't working anyway. I was a little frustrated with this quilt at that point. So this is kind of the space I was wanting to fill in. And I kind of like did the evil. So when I can't decide how to quilt something, I'll do the walk by, where it's on my long arm and I'll walk by and I'll give it the stank eye a little bit, and then walk back and like wait till it talks to me. A quilt has never talked to me, and I have drank a few glasses of wine around one. So finally I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna have to pick something. I'm just gonna have to do something. And so I decided to do little mini blocks, kind of like little ghost blocks. So looking at some of the blocks in the quilt, this little Ohio star, I was like, oh, I can just quilt just sprinkle in some little blocks. That's a little enough to add some interest, to give me something to talk about, but not too difficult that I'm like, doing curved cross hatching or something like that. So I went to my computer and kind of made myself a high quality paper template. I just printed it out on printer paper and then marked it out, and then kind of just quilted around it and pretend like it was a little block. And I thought it turned out so cute. So sometimes the question I'm asked is, do I mark out my designs beforehand? This would be a perfect example of when I would mark out a design. When it's a star, and I know it has to look right, and so it's a lot easier just to go ahead and mark those lines. Now, after I quilted the stars, though, I realized they're going to get kind of lost in the background filler, right? Because I don't want to do teeny tiny quilting over this whole quilt. Like, quilt walk was coming down the pipe, right? I needed to get this thing done. So I decided to help the stars stand out, I would do some pebbles around it, just right up close to it, and then quickly transition to swirls, which are a little bit quicker for me. So when I'm looking at designs or picking designs, a question I'm always asking is this going to take, do I have enough time for this design? And so adding a few pebbles helps kind of draw attention to them without having to do pebbles over the whole area. Just kind of fun. And it's usually about that many pebbles that I'm like, and I'm done. That's enough pebbles for me. So you can kind of see, I just sprinkled them wherever. I tried not to think too much about it. The problem was there wasn't a whole lot of room. So I was kind of like, they're random, but they almost look like I'm trying to be regular, but not quite right. So I say this a lot in my chats or whatever. I'm like, if you're going to make a mistake, just make it really big so it looks intentional. So I was kind of like, okay, I really want them to not look like I'm trying to make them even. But here you can see the cute little box. Not fun, just nice and fun, and not too difficult comparatively. Another thing I didn't really talk about around the blocks, echoing. You guys know I love echoing, quilting that line a set distance away from the block. Echoing is just a great way to help separate a block from the rest of the filler. And just a few minutes ago, I said something along the lines, if I had pieced this, I would have picked different designs. Joni pieced this, and she is a friggin' masterful piecer. Like she's like a retired home ec teacher. She can make her points match like nobody's business. So I want to show those blocks off. So putting echoing around it helps separate the filler, just kind of like, hey, check out the great job Joni did right here. Now, if I had pieced that block and it wasn't pieced very well, I'm not going to echo it. I'm not going to separate it. I'm going to do something over the top of it and do something really cool in another area. So all in, I was happy with how it turned out. Besides those lines not connecting, that was kind of a bummer. But what are you going to do? You can kind of see the different designs there. And it's funny because I love a dense like filler. I love quilting things to death and then doing more to it, right? The great thing about it is you can change that based on your preferences. Just by changing the spacing between your lines, you can adjust the density. I like all that dense quilting in the background, but honestly, it would have given me the same effect if I had quilted it a little bit bigger. But I'm kind of a glutton for tiny quilting like that. So anyway, a few more pictures. There's nothing quite like finishing a quilt. I love starting a new project, and I love finishing it, especially when it comes off the frame for the first time. With a particular design like this, I'm kind of seeing it in chunks, and when you get to pull it off and see it all together, that's usually the best part. Another thing that I quilted right before Quilt Walk, so I was like, oh, I got a few hours. Let's just whip this thing out. This was a panel I designed to go with the fabric collection. Liberty Blooms is the name of the collection. One of the really cool things about producing our own fabric is I can do whatever I want. I'm like, you know what, Jessica, we need 2 quilt panels, not 1, 2, and I should probably quilt one of them before Quilt Walk. So this particular panel is just some, just some squares, that kind of motif in the center, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to quilt this? It's funny because when I'm designing the panel, or even when I'm piecing a quilt, I'm not usually thinking about the quilting. It's almost like a surprise, right? I get done with the piecing and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to think about the quilting. I could have been doing that this whole time. But this particular quilt, one thing I wanted to try was I wanted to kind of work in concentric rings, working out from that center square. So instead of looking at different squares like this, I kind of imagined that it was a border around that. And I think you can kind of see it right here. So instead of quilting each block separately necessarily, I was kind of looking at it like a border. That was my grand vision. I did know it was going to be a little tricky because there's so many different fabrics. I wasn't sure how it was going to show up. This was kind of my idea. So the first ring of squares around that, focal print would have a feather. The next one would have geometric dot to dot, feather, and then some geometric. I just mocked this up today, like right before the live chat, just so you can kind of get an idea what I'm talking about. I didn't necessarily do that beforehand, but sometimes sketching it out just helps me get a visual of what the design is going to look like. Now, the tricky part here was, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a feather in one ring. What do I do in the next one? Of course, I could do feather, feather, feather. I mean, you can never have too many feathers. But I decided to change it up. Usually, the kind of like rule I'll give myself is if I pick a design for one area, I'll pick something that's different for the next. So if I'm doing, a curvy feather in one area, I'm going to do something geometric in the next one. And so here you can almost see the quilting. Again, that fabric was pretty busy, so the quilting didn't show up too much. You can kind of see the red thread there and the feathers. I'm happy with how it turned out, but, really you can't tell too much when you're looking at it. So you can kind of see that. And honestly, doing that on a long arm was a little tricky because I was working on the diagonals. So there was some finagling, there was some starting and stopping. And at the end of the day, you can't really see it anyway. So maybe I should have just did something different. All right, so here's just kind of a little video of the quilting. You can kind of see it a little bit. So I was like, hey, a feather would fit perfectly in this area. I could treat it like a border. I was kind of conflicted on what thread color to use, so I went with red, just for fun. So anyway, it was fine. I liked it. But I have to remember next time there should be maybe not so much difference between the squares, so it looks more like a border and less like random squares where sometimes a feather is showing up. But the center of the quilt I was super happy with. So this kind of look to me looks kind of like applique. Obviously it's not, because I'm not going to be doing any hand applique or anything like that. But it's one of the motifs that are in the fabrics, and so I kind of pulled it out and kind of blew it up. And I decided, I'm going to do all my favorite things in this square. This is where I'm going to put the biggest amount of my time. And so echoing the block, adding some filler around the motifs, and then putting some wishbones in there in a different thread color. I'm easily amused, so take that for what it is, but I loved how it turned out. So first, I need to echo, and then I need to add my filler in amongst the elements. And we've kind of seen this in previous video series when we did like the Hello Spring or the Season's Greetings. I'm just kind of, echoing and adding some designs, kind of filling in that area so that I'm just about an inch or so away from the binding, the echoing. I want to leave a little bit of gap between those two because I knew I wanted to come back and put some wishbones, but I know that I don't like quilting really long wishbones, so trying to keep that somewhat consistent, about an inch or two. And so you can kind of tell working there. Then, once that was done, then I can come back and add my wishbones in between. Wishbones are a fun design because it kind of goes back and forth, and so it just really fills in those irregular areas. And just a little pop of that red. I just love how it turned out. I wasn't sure about the red at first, but I was like, the feathers didn't quite turn out exactly how I wanted them to look. So I put a little bit more of a contrasting thread color maybe to help draw attention to that. Now, we are our own not worst enemy, but critics, so I'm happy with it. I was just, giving you a little peek into why I picked some of the things I pick. All right, so those two things, the reason I showed them is because I haven't shown them to you yet, but also we're having a big 4th of July sale. So basically the Spangled products that you've seen, the panel, the kit, we have on sale limited time. So if you're interested, if you're kind of like, I want to try that, you can definitely check that out. Now there's a link in the description box that will take you to all the products. Most of them are about 25% off because of the $250. Anna was like, can I do 250% off? I'm like, no, we probably can't do that. We're giving you money to buy this stuff. That would be funny. Anyway, so we have the kit. We also have the pattern. It's available in PDF or print. Look how beautiful that is. And so you can make the pattern. I didn't piece it, but it's really not that hard. I don't think anyway. And we also have some panels and some stickers. So this is another cute little thing I made with the fabric, so a little sticker. And then the 2 panels I showed you. So all those things are on sale for a limited time only if you want to try it. I know, like, you know, if you were wanting to do something for 4th of July, it's probably too late now, but there's always next year. And then Liberty Blooms is that fabric collection I was telling you about, and so that's also on sale. The yardage and the fat quarter bundle. So if you're like, you know what, I need a little bit of teal in my life, that might be the thing to check out. So again, just click the link in the description box and you can check out all that while supplies last. That was a lot of talking about quilting. I love it. Being off for the last 3 weeks was kind of hard. I was like, Jeremy, do you want me to do a live chat for you? And he was like, no. So I don't know. It's kind of funny. All right, real quick, I did get one question in the type chat before we went live. Bradley asked, what is the speed on my long arm? So when I'm quilting on my long arm, what is that speed set to? Now, I'm going to answer that question here in a second, but it's different for everybody, and it's different for every design. So it's kind of like saying, how fast do you drive your car? Well, it depends. You know, am I on the highway? Am I late? Or am I going downtown? My machine usually is set around 78%. My Avante, that's how the speed works. It's a percentage of the motor capacity. Other long arms go by different numbers, so it probably isn't very helpful to you. The thing is, you want to find the speed that is fast enough that you can't critique the job that you're doing while you're doing it, right? So you don't want to be out of control, but you really don't want to be thinking about what you're doing. You want to have already moved on. So trying to find that speed is just going to come with practice. I promise it comes quicker than you might think. All right, any questions? I love answering the questions. This is probably my favorite part. All right, what is your suggestion for making your quilt larger? I seem to be able to only quilt small designs. Oh, so the quilting larger, yeah, not the quilt larger. That's a different answer. Okay, changing the scale of the quilting or feeling like you can't do that on a whim can be frustrating. The bad news is it comes with practice. There's no like secret thing to help you. Most of us have a size that just comes naturally. My natural size is tiny. I would say try not to fight whatever your natural instinct is. But then once you learn the design and you're like, okay, now I know how to quilt this design, then you can start focusing on the spacing between your lines. So whether that's, you know, running the foot along that previously quilted line or imagining that there's a spacing there. I get that it's like hard when you're like wanting to do it and your brain just won't tell your hands what to do. But the best analogy I can use for this is handwriting. And I use this a lot, so I know you guys have heard it. But when we learned how to write our name or write our letters, our teacher didn't care what size our letters were. They didn't care if they were all even. You worked on the letter. And then you worked on your handwriting. Then now you can write your name the same each time. So you're just learning the letters, and then you'll get there. So hopefully that'll help. Another thing that could just keep in mind is if you're on like a sewing machine and maybe some designs are longer, or you have trouble making that bigger movement, maybe not doing those in like the heavier part of the quilt center. So hopefully that makes sense. Any tips for quilting very large blocks that might not fit in the throat space? Oh yeah, blocks on point. Looks so cool, but then they're a problem, especially on a long arm. So what I'm gonna do is when I'm looking at a quilt, I'm looking at the block, I'm thinking, first of all, what is my plan of attack? That sounds kind of aggressive. How am I going to quilt this? Do I need to do the top halves of the block and then the bottom halves? Do I need to do the whole block and come back to where I need to end up? It's only then that I pick the design that accomplishes that. So for those machines or those blocks that don't fit in your throat space, picking a design that can be broken up into chunks. For instance, I should do a whole live chat on this because it would make more sense. But that continuous curve motif that we saw on the block, I'm doing my hand motion like this is going to help you, but that little flower, I can quilt it to where I start and end at the same spot, or I can quilt a row of the tops and come back and do the bottoms. And so really just kind of looking at breaking up the block and breaking up your designs. I'm going to make a note to maybe do a live chat on that because there's a lot more I can say about that. Did I use a long arm on this quilt? I did. I love quilting on sewing machine and a long arm. I like to say I'm bilingual. But my long arm is at home, and especially when I'm up against a tight deadline like that, I'm like, well, I'm going to be quilting it this evening. So how long did this take you to quilt? You know, and every time I start a quilt, I'm like, I'm going to keep track of it this time. This is the time I'll keep track. I didn't really keep track. And any answer I give right now would just be kind of a guess. But I'll say 4 or 5 hours if I had to guess. But I will say I quilt fast. There's no like hesitating for me. I'm like just having fun. So great questions. If you're not watching live, just leave your questions in the comments. I get on there from time to time to answer them, and other quilters are super helpful to answer as well. Now, I'll be back next week for another live chat on Thursday. Topic to be determined, but I did have a request for thread painting, so maybe we'll do a little bit of talking about how to pick your threads. I love doing the threads. All right, how about giveaways? Again, if you don't win, you can click the link in the description box and check those out. But the pattern is for Sarah's Sewing. So Sarah's Sewing, if you're a winner, email us at customerservice@quiltingismytherapy.com, and we'll get that out to you. All right, and then let's do the panel, which is that quilt with that cool little like applique in the center, and the sticker, and that's going to be for Bradley Walters. So Bradley, great last name too. What can I say? And the last one, the kit. So it's going to be the fabric and the pattern to make the kit is for Not Your Grandma's Quilts. So I love that, Not Your Grandma's Quilts. So congratulations if you won. Again, if you didn't, click the link in the description box below. I hope everybody has a safe holiday weekend. I hope everybody stays cool if it's really hot where you're at, because it's really hot where we're at. And I'll see you next week. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.